Hey, welcome back guys. In the last video we talked about the software testing approaches, the white box and black box testing and what's under them. And in today's video we're going to be talking about the software testing types. This is another quite popular topic for interviewers to question you during your first rounds of interviews with them. It might sound a bit confusing in the beginning, but I promise you that by the end of this video it's going to feel like a piece of cake for you. So stay tuned and let's dive right in. Alright, let's talk about the functional testing first because it's going to be super quick and super easy to understand. So functional testing is the act of ensuring that the functionality of the system that you're testing, the software application that you're testing, works as it should. So you're evaluating the functionality. Let's take an example. Like let's say you have a login page and you need to just test whether you're able to log into the system when providing your correct credentials. So you would provide the correct login, you would provide the correct password, and you would hit the login button, and you would expect to be navigated to the next screen, whatever it is. So whether it's the home page or it's your profile page, doesn't really matter. So if your expected result, like what you're expecting to see, is to be on that home page, and you get there after clicking the login button, you have performed a functional test. You have tested the functionality of the system, being able to take you from the login page to the home page. Similarly, when you would be testing an incorrect password, when you would be providing like a wrong password in the password field and then hit the login button, and you would be expecting an error message to be displayed to you because obviously your password is incorrect and you should not be able to get logged in. That's another type of a functional test. So you're again performing functional testing, you're testing the functionality of the system, providing you with an error message in case one of your credentials, in this case the password, is incorrect. Honestly, this is all there is about functional testing. So anytime, you just need to remember this, like anytime when you're performing a test which is about ensuring the functionality of a certain feature or a certain part of your software application, that's a functional test. And that's all about it. Now let's talk about non-functional testing. So in case of functional testing, where you were performing tests to ensure that the system that you're testing is performing the functions that it should. In case of non-functional testing, you're evaluating how well does it do so. So basically non-functional testing is the act of ensuring the all of the other aspects aside from the pure functionality of the features. And how well is quite a wide term, so we need to break it down a little bit. There are three main types that you will hear about or encounter of non-functional tests. So those are the performance testing, security testing, and usability testing. And let's go through them one by one and it will become super clear for you. So performance testing is the type, the types of tests that are under the performance testing hood are the ones that are, among other things, ensuring the efficiency of the functions that your software application has. Let's take the login page for example again. Basically, in case of functional testing, you were just making sure that you can get logged in, but a type of performance test would be to ensure that you get logged in the time that you want the system to get you logged in. So let's say you hit the login button and it takes you 5 seconds to get logged in, but you were expecting, according to your design specifications, to get logged in 1 second. This is a super primitive example, but enough to give you an idea. This would be a simple type of a performance test, and you're basically not evaluating the functionality because you know the functionality works. You performed your functional test and you know that you do get logged in and your test is done there. But here it's another type of test in which if you don't get signed in or logged in the right amount of time, it will still be considered a failure for your software and you would need to resolve that issue somehow. Now, performance testing is much more than just evaluating page load times. There are different subcategories, like even more. So you have basically non-functional testing, and you have performance testing, and you have even more subcategories under performance testing. And let's talk about the most common ones, at least the more popular ones that you will be asked about during your interviews. So you have load testing and stress testing as well under performance testing, and you will be asked about this. So load testing, real quick, it's a simple concept to understand, is basically you testing your system, your software application, under different types of load. Load means like different types of transactions or let's say concurrent users being logged in at the same time. So you would test your system when you have 10 users logged in, then you have 100 users logged in, then you have 1,000 users logged in, and so on and so forth. And you will be basically observing and evaluating how your system acts in these kind of circumstances. And this will help you discover the thresholds of your system starting to misbehave, and it will help you understand basically what kind of expectations to have once your software goes live. Then you have the stress testing, which is kind of related to load testing. So once you know your thresholds, once you know basically the breaking points of your application, you will be testing around those. You will test like near the edge of the limits of your hardware specifications or whatever else that might limit the concurrent actions on your system or software application under test. You basically test and see whether or not when it breaks, and once it breaks, whether or not it's able to recover well. And this is one of the main aims. Sometimes this type of test would be separated, like the recovery. It's actually called recovery testing, just to see how the software recovers after breaking down. And we took the users as an example, but it can be a number of concurrent transactions. Like if you have a banking application, for example, like an online banking application, you would want to validate, for example, how many transactions can be processed at the same time. And you would basically also stress test that, like if you are processing for some reason too many and then your system would break, what happens then? Will like just people's money go in vain? Will they just disappear, or there's some process around it which is ensuring that after the system recovers, everything gets back to normal, certain checks are performed, so on and so forth. I hope this makes it clear. Again, this is a popular question during interviews. So they would ask you something like, do you know the difference between performance testing and load testing, for example? And the right answer to that would be load testing is just a type of performance testing, and you will just explain to them what we just went through. All right, guys, now let's start talking about the other two types, and then we will make some conclusions in the end. Okay, so now let's talk about security testing. This testing type evaluates the software against security vulnerabilities, and it will be easy for you to understand this on an example. So let's take our login page again to explore this a bit better. So in case of your functional testing, say you have already performed it and you know that you're able to get logged in after providing the correct login and password. Then let's say you have run your performance test, where the simple one where you're basically ensuring that you get logged in quick enough. And in case of security testing, you would test something like what happens when you don't provide a password field and you hit the login button. If you're able to get logged in without providing a password, it will be a security vulnerability, because someone else, without knowing your password, just knowing your login detail, which is quite easy to deduce even if they know you personally, can get logged into the system with your profile and get access to your personal information. And security testing can be much more complex than this, and it is much more complex than this example. There is different subtypes like penetration testing, overall vulnerability assessment, network security testing, and more. And this can be a separate profession. There are security testers whose only job is basically to perform security testing. And luckily for you, this testing type is not mandatory for you to know like end to end, because it, as I said, it would be very complex for you to know. But at least in the beginning, it's good enough for you to know these general concepts, to know what security testing is about, and be able to answer a couple of simple questions during your initial interview rounds. Usually for a junior tester's position, people or interviewers would not be asking you too deep questions around this, like about the usage of specific security testing tools or different methodologies, so on and so forth. Now, hope this is clear. Let's move on to the usability testing. Usability testing is the last one that we'll cover today. And again, let's say, so you've performed your functional testing, you've performed your performance testing, you know your login runs as quick as you need to. You have also performed your security testing. You know that there is no like unauthenticated access in case of our simple kind of example there. And but at the end, so everything works fine in all of these other regards. But then your login button, say, is so small that you're not able to click on it. Like it's there, it's functional, but like you need to make 10 attempts before you can hit that button to get logged in. and or for example the font on the buttons is so small that you can't really read it, or like you need to concentrate a lot. Like this will drive away a bunch of your users, and it will not be usable by some even. So usability testing is basically the type of testing that ensures that the software is usable by your intended target audience. And there are types of, again, some subtypes of usability testing as well, like accessibility testing, for example, where you would ensure that the software that you're designing can also be used by people with disabilities, for example. Like if you have a button which just has a color on it and doesn't have any text on it, for example, and it's possible that a person who is colorblind will be using that and they won't recognize the color, and they might misuse the software, and then they will get frustrated and they will stop using it, basically. So these are the types of tests that are performed under usability testing, but not only. So you would basically ensure that you would need to know your end users quite well, and it's usually done like intuitively, again, like knowing the users, knowing what they would expect, and then interacting with your software, conducting your tests in that way. And also you would combine this with some standards, like ISO has some standards, for example, on like ergonomic usage of human and machine interactions, for example, or even some more, like again around accessibility as well. But in some cases, usability testing is even delegated to actual users, like people would be picking, companies would be picking random people, like from their target audience, target user base, and they will just give a version, like an early version of the application for them to try. Like if it's a game, for example, intended for people who are 7 years old, say just an example, they would grab a bunch of like 7-year-old people and they will give it to them to try, and then they will just play around and they will raise their concerns and tell about their opinions, and that will be factored into the overall usability assessment. Now, I hope this is also clear, and at the end of the video, let's jump into some conclusions specifically around which of these you will need to be focused more on and which you don't need to kind of like, it's recommended if you want to learn more, but it's not mandatory. Let's talk about what you will really need. Okay, so in conclusion, not all of the skills and not all of the testing types that we have just covered are going to be required for you to know or to master before you get your first job. You will definitely need functional testing, and anyways, most of the kind of test cases that you will write and the testing that you will perform even before you get a job, when you're just practicing your skills, will be around the functional kind of side of things. In terms of performance testing, it would be good for you to know that there are such concepts and they need to be kind of performed, but if you don't have the skills, you don't kind of have knowledge of some tools, you don't know how to automate, for example, load testing to have a bunch of concurrent users at the same time, because you obviously can't find 1,000 users to log in or 100,000 users to log in at the same time. That will be fine. You can pick them up later on, and especially for a junior tester position, you will not, like, no one will be kind of demanding this of you unless you're applying specifically for a junior performance tester or a junior security tester. So it's the same about security testing as well. You don't need to be like a total kind of guru of this, or you don't even need to know like, again, some tools, some penetration testing tools, whatever. You just need to know that there is such a thing, that it should be part of the software testing lifecycle, especially with kind of some business critical applications, like, I don't know, finance applications, online banking, whatever else it is, or things that deal with personal user data. But again, yeah, good to know, but not necessarily in the very early stages of your career. And then in terms of usability testing, it would be good for you to know and to master, because it's quite simple, and it would be expected for you to be also performing usability tests, and we will go through those when we start kind of practicing all of these skills that we've learned throughout the course as well. Yeah, like, main focus would be usability testing and functional testing, and we will then in the upcoming videos understand when those type of tests are being performed. So we'll talk about test levels, and which is another concept, one of the last ones before we start diving into more practical examples, and then you will understand how that works better, how you separate those type of tests, when you perform each of those, so on and so forth. Right, guys, hope this video was helpful again for you, and share your thoughts in the comment section. What I'm thinking is maybe we could arrange a live session in case throughout these videos you have developed some questions that you would want a more kind of interactive session around. If you think that would be a good idea, just leave your comments under this video and we can arrange it. We can do just a live question and answer session to go through anything that I might have missed or you have a specific interest in, and we will cover that in more detail. Right, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you next week.